What did the rock say to the flower? Okay, bloomer.
Just like video games and movies, there are a lot of feuds that break out on the internet over TV shows. So today we'll discuss some of the most prominent over the past decade. Bill Nye taught a generation of children to love science with his 1990s television show, Bill Nye the Science Guy. Over time, he used the nostalgic love millennials had for him in order to springboard into more mainstream popularity, creating even more projects to spread scientific education. In 2017, he returned with a new program on Netflix titled Bill Nye Saves the World. Many on sites like Reddit were excited to watch the show with their children who were the same age as them when they had watched him in the 90s. But as the show premiered, many began to turn on the once loved science man. For the most part, this show was relatively unassuming. That is, except for one episode, which would stand out from the rest as being particularly despised. Season 1, Episode 9, titled The Sexual Spectrum, discussed modern understandings of sex, sexuality, and gender. Nye's frank assertion that all these things existed on a spectrum and that the current labels used by society were inaccurate rubbed many people the wrong way. But it was his method of expressing this that really irked these online watchers. The first thing that really caught mass attention was a short cartoon depicting sentient ice cream cones, with Vanilla trying to convert all other flavors to be like him in an allegory for gay conversion therapy. Audiences objected to this for a few reasons. One, they felt as though the presentation of this short was talking down to the audience. And two, some claim that the cartoon's conclusion undermined its own point. While Vanilla was chastised for trying to make the other types of ice cream more like him, it ends with them coercing him into what is best described as a gay ice cream orgy. On top of this, even people who agreed with the larger point of the episode expressed frustration with how the animation seemed to depict LGBTQ lifestyles as being exclusively sexual and deviant. But that ended up not even being the standout moment of the episode. At the very end, Bill Nye brought comedian Rachel Bloom out on stage in order to perform a song titled My Sex Junk. Unlike the cartoon, no amount of description could do this performance justice. It can only be seen to be believed.
'Cause my sex junk is so much more than either.
No matter how people felt about the episode as a whole, it was unanimously agreed that this song was not very good. Even though this was the most talked about installment of Bill Nye Saves the World, the show still faced a couple other smaller controversies. The second episode discussed the topic of alternative medicines. Bill brought out one of his writers to ramble on about cultural appropriation, with many wondering what this had to do with science.
But stop using Asian wallpaper for street cred. I see what you're doing, and it's stupid.
Another clip that courted controversy was of a panel discussion about ways to combat climate change. At one point, the topic of population control came up, prompting the following exchange.
So should we have policies that penalize people for having extra kids in the developed world?
So I do think that we should at least consider it.
Well, at least consider it is like do it.
This was also spread around online, with most vocal critics accusing Nye of wanting the United States to adopt a one-child policy like the Chinese Communist Party. This outrage did not get as far as the others though, since many more people who watched the full clip argued that the conversation was much more nuanced, and the majority of people on the panel were firmly against the idea. Still, this collection of moments have cemented Bill Nye Saves the World as a miss in the eyes of many of his once fervent fans. But this would only be the first of many skirmishes in the television wars of the World Wide Web. We'll learn about the others after a word from our sponsor. Have you ever had a night where you wanted to go to bed early because you need to wake up early the next day, but you just simply couldn't? Well, I think I have a solution to that problem that has personally been working well for me. Beam's Hot Cocoa Powder has a special formulation of ingredients that have been proven in studies to help you fall asleep, stay asleep, and be refreshed the next day. Their products include things such as melatonin, a compound that regulates the body's circadian rhythm, magnesium, a mineral that aids the body's ability to fall asleep by relaxing the muscles and regulating the nervous system, Reishi, a mushroom superfood that helps to support the body's sleep cycle and manage stress. And those are just a few of the highlights. I like this product so much because I didn't have to go through a bunch of research on my own and buy a bunch of supplements. This product combines it all together in a tasty beverage that you could sip on before bed. So all I have to do to try to get these benefits when I need to wake up early the next day is when I'm prepared to fall asleep, 45 minutes before, I get a scoop of this, put it in some hot water, sip on it, and then I'm pretty much asleep within an hour. I've tried it multiple times with both of their formulations and it all works. And a scoop of Beam is only 15 calories with no added sugar. It's so much better than trying to take a bunch of supplements. Because of this, I highly recommend everyone try out Beam for themselves and subscribe to save 20%. Plus, get an additional 15% off and a free frother with my code of GFM when you click the link down below. That's up to 35% off the original price. And you can pause, skip, or cancel anytime, so there's no risk to you. The Teen Titans became icons of DC after Marv Wolfman and George Perez's landmark comic book series in the 1980s. The team of young adult superheroes only became more popular in the mainstream when they received a TV cartoon adaptation in 2003. For years, executives at Warner Brothers tried to get this highly marketable IP into a live-action format. Development began all the way back in 2014 for a show intended to air on the TNT network. But as time went on, the project gradually shifted to the short-lived DC Universe streaming service instead. The first trailer for the show, now titled Titans, premiered at San Diego Comic-Con in 2018. Fans of the old comics and cartoon were immediately put off by the dark and violent tone this show seemed to be taking, which was a vast departure from the bright and colorful adventures the Teen Titans were normally known for. One moment in particular stood out to these viewers as particularly egregious. After a fight scene in which the character Robin brutally takes down a group of thugs, he says the infamous line, Most audiences seem to agree that this made Titans seem like it was trying too hard to be edgy in order to separate itself from its more child-friendly contemporary cartoon Teen Titans Go, and the line was widely mocked online. Jeff Jones, one of the show's executive producers, soon stepped forward in order to provide damage control as the clip quickly spiraled into a meme.
The trailer shows a piece of the tone of the show. The show's not all that, but it does make you go, why is he saying F Batman? It's about all these lost characters finding one another, and they're all struggling with something, and Robin is clearly struggling with his past with Batman, and we'll learn a lot more about it and what that is and why he is the way he is.
Unsurprisingly, this did little to change the public's perception of what they saw. And this would not be the only aspect of Titans that people took issue with in the lead up to its premiere. Even before the trailer first dropped, fans got a chance to see a first look at another long-standing Teen Titans member, Starfire, when a photo from the set was leaked online. There were some who were upset by the character's skin color. While Starfire is traditionally presented as an orange-skinned alien in other incarnations, the actress appeared to not be wearing any makeup in this photo. Others took issue with the clothes she was wearing, with some saying they made her look like a streetwalker. Of course, there were people who spoke up in the show's defense, accusing all critics of simply being sexist and racist. They argued that Starfire had never been modestly dressed in any version of the comics or even the cartoon for children, and thus were confused why this relatively tame outfit was receiving such a sexually specific backlash. Those on the other side fired back, saying that the clothes were far too ordinary for an otherworldly character such as Starfire. For her part, the actress who played the role, Anna, spoke up to try to dampen the outrage, claiming that her character would be wearing far more comic-accurate costume later in the show's first season. But when the premiere arrived and more episodes got released, it became increasingly clear that this was not true. Titans continued for several years, eventually migrating to HBO Max before being cancelled in 2023 after 4 seasons. Despite the initial outrage prior to airing, the show never received anywhere near the same amount of attention once it became available to the public. While it has gotten favorable reviews from critics and audiences alike, it will likely never live down the reputation from that first trailer. Lilly Singh got her start making YouTube videos under the name Superwoman in 2010, with her primary focus being sketch comedy. Gaining millions of views and subscribers during her online career, it was only a matter of time until someone in the mainstream media took notice. In 2019, it was announced that she had partnered with NBC in order to host her very own late-night talk show called A Little Late with Lilly Singh. This news left people more confused than excited. For one, by that point in time, both broadcast television and talk shows were viewed as a dying industry. Someone as supposedly successful as Lilly jumping from the lucrative world of online content to the sinking ship of traditional media made very little sense to the majority of viewers. And two, even if it did make sense for a YouTuber to make such a transition, Lilly Singh's audience was largely composed of teens, a demographic not known for enjoying late-night television. Even before it began airing, this seemed like a project that was destined for failure. It didn't help that Superwoman, despite her massive subscriber base, was not the most popular figure in the online landscape even before this announcement. As an example, in December of 2018, Forbes published a list of the highest paid YouTubers that year. Upon seeing this article, Lilly had one very specific criticism of it.
2 years ago, it was almost even between male and female. Last year, it was just me, and this year there are no females at all, something I predicted in my Instagram caption last year. I'm concerned the digital space is going to repeat the mistakes of ancient industries. Hope I'm wrong.
This tweet spurred a massive backlash against the online entertainer. Critics argued that the amount of money earned by YouTubers was unlike any other industry. Since each creator was their own boss, success or failure was determined entirely by audiences. On top of that, since Lilly was already very wealthy by this point, people accused her of simply being petty that her name wasn't on the seemingly arbitrary list. Singh later somewhat walked back her statement, saying that she was not upset that she wasn't mentioned by Forbes specifically, but was simply trying to defend the role of women on YouTube. Regardless, this attitude certainly did not have many internet users rooting for her talk show to succeed. And when the show finally did air, audiences were not kind to it. While professional critics gave it glowing praise, onlookers on social media tore it to shreds for a variety of reasons. One talking point around quite a bit was the apparent overzealousness of the audience, as they laughed hysterically at every single joke told.
So distracting because there's almost nothing authentic about these reactions. Sometimes they're not even just laughing at the jokes, they're laughing at the setups for the jokes.
I don't know about y'all, but I'm freezing.
What are you laughing at? She hasn't said the funny part yet.
According to some people who were in attendance during the tapings, this was by design, as Singh and her team would come out before the show in order to instruct the audience to laugh as loud as possible.
So before the warm-up gets to start their spiel, a voice comes on in the sky, and we are told to look at her while she's standing on the monologue X and laugh and applaud and do all of that while they record it. Okay guys, so we're gonna sweep the camera again. Okay, one more time. Louder, okay. So now we're gonna have her go over there. You guys are gonna look at Lily's desk and you guys are gonna laugh and clap, okay?
But by far the most widely repeated criticism of A Little Late was her alleged over-reliance on jokes related to her race, gender, and sexual orientation.
But now, thanks to me, your kids will grow up to be bisexual women of color talk show hosts. You're welcome, Auntie G.
Yes, in addition to attempting to make people laugh, Singh's other goals seem to be trailblazing a path for minorities in the world of TV, a fact which she often boasted about in her monologues. But this emphasis on progressive talking points would end up backfiring on Lilly during an interview with Jessica Alba, in which the actress described her technique for dyeing her children's hair. This sparked a minor outrage online, accusing both the host and her guest of being racist against cultures who wear turbans. Lilly was quick to apologize for her joke in this episode.
And I, without thinking, said, "Oh, don't worry, it's like, it reminds me of my Punjabi friends." And in my mind, the sentiment I was trying to communicate was, I think that's dope because I have so many Punjabi friends and it's dope. It's not how it came out.
Despite the initial torrent of backlash and drama against the show as it first started airing, as time went on, interest in A Little Late took a steep decline. After only 2 seasons on the air, NBC opted to cancel the program, sending Lilly Singh back once again to the internet. Based on the DC Comics character of the same name, 2019's Batwoman followed the adventures of a new crime fighter donning the mantle of Gotham City's protector after the disappearance of Batman. When the first trailer dropped in May of that year, it received an immensely negative reaction, gaining a dislike ratio of around 70%. This was attributed to a few factors, with the main one being the character of Batwoman herself. Played by the actress Ruby Rose, many viewers found the trailer to focus too heavily on the titular heroine's gender, to the point where it made her seem self-absorbed and unlikable.
I need you to fix his suit.
The suit is literal perfection.
It will be. When it fits a woman. I'm not about to let a man take credit for a woman's work.
On top of that, others simply found the trailer to be poorly edited and unengaging. As is often the case, this backlash was met with mockery by those who felt the anger was caused simply by people who were mad that the lead character of the show was a gay woman. Even Ruby Rose, who had supposedly shut down her Twitter account after the initial outrage over her casting in the role, spoke up about the people criticizing the trailer.
Some people might not see themselves on screen and therefore not see the point. But there's obviously plenty of shows for people like that. There's plenty of shows for white old men.
This statement did nothing to change anyone's mind either way. When the first season premiered in October, it received an abysmal audience score of 16% on Rotten Tomatoes. Despite this, the ratings were apparently still good enough for the CW to renew the series for a second season. However, there would still be significant problems to solve before the network could begin filming. In May of 2020, it was announced that Ruby Rose would not be returning for season 2 of Batwoman. This confused many viewers, who wondered how the show could continue without its lead performer. While the CW initially stated that the split had been a mutual decision, over time more and more details began to make their way to the public, which threw the claim into question. For starters, news began to break about an injury Rose suffered on the set of season 1, requiring her to receive emergency surgery or else her spinal cord would have been permanently severed. According to the actress, a couple years later, she had been pressured by the show's producers to return to work filming action stunt scenes merely 10 days after her operation, with them allegedly threatening to fire all members of the cast and crew if she did not comply. In addition, Rose claimed that she was not the only person to be injured on the set of Batwoman. As she told the story, 2 stunt performers had to be replaced after suffering accidents. A crew member received third-degree burns which caused the skin to peel off his face in front of everyone, and a PA was left paralyzed after yet another incident. That last story appears to be the only one that has received public documentation. On top of this, there was allegedly even more toxic behavior from the show's producers and actors. Allegedly, WB television executive Peter Roth had, quote, made young women steam his pants around the crotch while he was still wearing said pants. She also accused multiple co-stars of exhibiting self-centered behavior while filming. For their part, the CW and Warner Bros. Completely denied any allegations of poor treatment behind the scenes. According to them, it had actually been Rose who had received multiple complaints from her co-workers, leading her to be removed from the series. In a statement given to the press, they wrote,
despite the revisionist history that Ruby Rose is now sharing online aimed at the producers, the cast and crew, the network, and the studio, the truth is that Warner Bros. Television had decided not to exercise its option to engage Ruby for season 2 of Batwoman based on multiple complaints about workplace behavior that were extensively reviewed and handled privately out of respect for all concerned.
Other members of the crew also began speaking out in the show's defense, with one production assistant describing Rose as a dictator. She had allegedly shown up late for work consistently without having her lines memorized and treated those who worked beneath her poorly, barking orders and seemingly never taking their needs into consideration. As for the former Batwoman star, she went on to post several screenshots of email exchanges between herself and the show's producers in order to back up her claims. Despite this, that is where the situation stands today, with neither side backing down from their positions. Ruby Rose has vowed never to return to the role under any circumstance.
To my dear fans still asking if I will return to that awful show, I wouldn't return for any amount of money, nor if a gun were to my head.
But even though it had lost its star, Batwoman soldiered on. For the next 2 seasons, the lead role was played by Javi Shea Leslie. In the canon of the show, Leslie played Ryan Wilder, an original creation not based on any comic book character who took up the Batwoman mantle after Rose's Kate Kane had gone missing in action. While there were some who expressed anger that the previously white main character had been replaced by a black woman, most had lost any ability to care about the show after all the controversies surrounding Ruby Rose. Batwoman was finally cancelled after season 3 due to low ratings. In November 2019, Disney Plus began airing The Mandalorian, the first ever live-action Star Wars television series. The show was an instant hit with both casual audiences and hardcore fans alike, making it another pop culture staple for the already beloved franchise. Of the new characters introduced in The Mandalorian, one that the viewers took a particular liking to was the mercenary Cara Dune, played by Gina Carano. Even people who were at first skeptical of this addition to the Star Wars lore, thinking she may be portrayed as a Mary Sue, enjoyed her inclusion once they saw her in action. Yes, by all accounts, it seemed as though many Star Wars fans had a new favorite character to latch onto, and there were even early talks to create a spin-off show focused on this new intergalactic mercenary. However, a series of outside events would soon throw a wrench into this newfound success. What needs to be understood is that during this time, Carano was a very active user of social media. More specifically, she was a politically active user of these sites, posting a great deal of opinions that many onlookers found objectionable. For an example, in the midst of the pandemic during November 2020, she posted a meme against mask mandates. Later in the month, amid mass accusations of voter fraud in that year's presidential election, Carano wrote the following tweet.
"We need to clean up the election process so we are not left feeling the way we do today. Put laws in place that protect us against voter fraud. Investigate every state. Film the counting. Flush out the fake votes. Require ID. Make voter fraud end in 2020. Fix the system."
These tweets, as well as several other controversial online statements made by the actress, angered many people on the internet. The hashtag #FireGino trended multiple times as she continued fanning the flames of discourse. Behind the scenes at Lucasfilm, executives were reportedly becoming increasingly annoyed about how she was affecting their brand image. According to some sources, she had been warned multiple times by the studio's higher-ups about her use of social media. But this did nothing to change her ways. It was only a matter of time before things reached a breaking point. In February of 2021, Gina posted a statement to her Instagram story which read,
"Jews were beaten in the streets not by Nazi soldiers but by their neighbors, even by children. Because history is edited, most people today don't realize that to get to the point where Nazi soldiers could easily round up thousands of Jews, the government first made their own neighbors hate them simply for being Jews. How is that any different from hating someone for her political views?"
This once again caused the storm of outrage to rise, with hashtag #FireGinaCarano returning to Twitter's trending tab. This was the final straw, as Carano had evidently crossed a line in the eyes of Lucasfilm's management. It was quickly reported that she had been fired from The Mandalorian, and any plans of her spin-off show were scrapped. This sparked a massive debate online. Those who supported Carano argued that if the opinion she stated had been more left-wing, that the studio likely would have turned a blind eye. But those who were against her stated that this was simply a business decision that the actress should have seen coming based on the prior warnings. Since this event, The Mandalorian has continued without Cara Dune, and Gina has not been in any major studio productions, only films made by Ben Shapiro. While it still remains unclear where exactly her career will go at this point, it's undeniable that this whole ordeal had left a permanent mark on her public image. The Witcher series of books have already proven to be successful when adapted to other mediums, with the video game stories of the same name selling tens of millions of copies. Because of this already established popularity, Netflix announced it would be turning the property into a live-action TV series in 2017. At that point, video game adaptations had a stigma around them for their often poor quality, so fans were skeptical about how this would turn out. Some of these fears were lightened when Henry Cavill was cast in the lead role as Geralt of Rivia. Cavill had already proven himself to be an avid gamer, and enjoyed both the Witcher video games and original novels they were based on. While this didn't get rid of the audience's concerns entirely, the fact that at least one person behind the scenes enjoyed the source material increased hype somewhat. When the show finally premiered in 2019, it received favorable reviews from critics and audiences alike. There were some aspects of it that sparked anger, such as the race swapping of the character Triss Marigold, but for the most part, viewers were very happy with how the world of The Witcher had been portrayed. But as time went on, more and more people began speaking up about the inaccuracies between the source material and what appeared on screen. Even Henry Cavill appeared to believe this. During an interview in order to promote the show's second season, he said, quote,
"The toughest part for me was finding that balance between the showrunner's vision and my love for the books, and trying to bring that girl to the showrunner's vision. It's about treading a fine line there. It's the showrunner's story, and so it's an adaptation."
With this, a few audience members started theorizing about potential tensions between The Witcher's writers and its star, and it wouldn't be long until those tensions would break. In October 2022, it was announced that Season 3 would be Cavill's final time playing Geralt, with Liam Hemsworth being cast in the role for Season 4. Immediately, speculation ran wild about what had caused this split. While some believed he simply chose to walk away from the show in order to return to playing Superman in the DC movies, others had different ideas. People took Cavill's statements from earlier as evidence of the glowing disdain he had for the direction of the story, believing that things simply hit a boiling point where he couldn't take it anymore. This theory was bolstered when one of the show's former writers, Bo DiMaio, talked about his experience working with the series' creative team during an Instagram Q&A.
"I've been on shows, namely Witcher, where some of the writers were not fans or actively disliked the books and games, even actively mocking the source material. It's a recipe for disaster and bad morale."
This sparked outrage from the hordes of angry Witcher fans who asked why people who seemingly hated the property were put in charge of adapting it. This story came out during a period of increasing animosity audiences had toward video game adaptations. Earlier that year, the showrunners of the Paramount Plus Halo TV series had faced similar backlash when they publicly stated they had not played the games while writing the show. However, not everyone was throwing their support behind Cavill. Shortly after his exit, rumors began circulating about his poor behavior on set. Allegedly, he had become increasingly rude and dismissive to members of the cast and crew, specifically women, exhibiting what some described as toxic gamer bro mannerisms. According to these reports, the actor had undermined the authority of showrunner Lauren Hisrich multiple times, rewriting scripts behind her back at the last minute and costing Netflix a significant amount of money in delays. Those in Cavill's corner were unfazed by this, claiming that it was just further proof of his commitment to making sure the source material was honored. As of now, nothing has been confirmed either way about what really went down on the set of The Witcher. In the late 90s and early 2000s, one of Cartoon Network's most popular shows was the Powerpuff Girls. Following the adventures of three superpowered little kids, the stylized animation and over-the-top violent actions captured the attention of audiences everywhere, turning the series into a global phenomenon for a period of time. Because of this, many attempts have been made over the years to recapture that success, with less than stellar results. And one of these failed reboots managed to unite the internet in outrage despite the fact that it has never been released. In August 2020, the CW network announced that they were developing a live-action series which would follow the Powerpuff Girls as adults in their 20s, dealing with the trauma they faced in their childhood as superheroes. The cartoon's original creator, Craig McCracken, was not involved, with the project instead being co-written by Diablo Cody and Heather Rainier. While this news ruffled the feathers of many longtime fans, this was brought down slightly when McCracken himself stated that he was, quote, curious to see what they do with it. The production continued normally for the next few months, with the lead roles soon being filled by actresses Chloe Bennett, Yana Perot, and Dove Cameron. While things seemed to be going well from an outsider's perspective, with some scenes even starting to be filmed, there was clearly some troubles happening at the studio. On May 24th, 2021, the CW announced that they would be completely reworking Powerpuff from the script level while still keeping on the same cast and crew. In a statement to the press, the president of Warner Bros. TV Group said the following.
"I'm not going to say that it hasn't been a challenge, Bringing a children's cartoon into live-action adulthood has been a really fine line to walk, but I think we've done a pretty good job walking it.
While they most likely hoped that they would be able to rework things quietly after this, they were not so lucky. Later that same day, the entire original script for the pilot was leaked onto the internet, and fans were universally horrified by what they read. Among the many questionable choices in this draft were multiple mentions of the girls having sex and doing drugs, ham-fisted political rhetoric, and characters behaving completely differently to how they were portrayed in the original cartoon. The major consensus by most people who saw this script was that it was simply trying too hard to be hip and adult, while completely losing sight of what the old Powerpuff Girls show was trying to accomplish.
Blossom's fine. I saw on her Insta that she has a boyfriend. I saw on her LinkedIn that she got promoted. And I saw on Facebook that she still talks to Grandpa despite their political differences. Coming back here is probably triggering for her. Why? Because she's the one who killed Mojo. I mean, MoveOn.org?
Despite the immense backlash, the CW soldiered on with the project. But when Chloe Bennett dropped out of her role a few months later in August, the writing seemed to be on the wall. Things remained quiet from the Powerpuff crew for quite some time, until it was finally announced in May of 2023 that the entire thing had been scrapped by higher-ups. While it hasn't been confirmed one way or another if the leaked script had anything to do with the cancellation, most onlookers agree that the immensely negative reaction the internet had to it certainly didn't help. Cowboy Bebop is one of the most critically acclaimed anime series of all time, with fans across the globe viewing it as a must-see piece of art. And as is the case with something so popular that was made in a foreign country, eventually American studios would want to cash in on it. In 2018, Netflix announced that they had acquired the rights to the then-in-development live-action adaptation of the series. By that point, anime fans had been burned before by Hollywood remakes of their favorite shows. In fact, they already had reason to distrust Netflix, specifically after their universally panned film adaptation of Death Note. Because of this, skepticism ran rampant online merely from the announcement. These early concerns became validated when Netflix released a first look at the main cast in their costumes. While some original series fans did not appreciate the race swapping of the character Jet Black, far more people were focused on Daniela Pineda as Faye Valentine, who wore a much less revealing outfit than her animated counterpart. Although many viewers were able to overlook this, the critics were apparently vocal enough that the actress decided to respond on her Instagram.
First, I wanted to apologize to the fans that I did not anatomically match the Faye Valentine character. 6 foot, double D size breast, 2-inch waist. You know, they looked everywhere for that woman and they couldn't find her. It's kind of weird. So they just went with my short ass. I know. Am I right?
This video split onlookers, with one side finding it to be a humorous clapback at the haters, while the other side saw it as blatantly disrespectful to the source material. This divide continued all the way through the show's marketing cycle, as a general consensus could not be reached on whether or not it appeared to be a faithful recreation of Cowboy Bebop.
Does Spike Spiegel
have a fake eye? I don't think he has a fake eye.
Oh, wait, hang on a second before we get into hot water. Is there some reference we don't know about?
But as initial reviews started to come out, the verdict seemed clear. Critics lambasted the show for its garish set and costume design, clunky and unfunny dialogue, and seeming disrespect for the anime it was adapting. The crushing blow came when Shinichiro Watanabe stated in an interview he could not bring himself to watch past the first scene.
I stopped there and so only saw that opening scene. It was clearly not Cowboy Bebop, and I realized at that point that if I wasn't involved, it would not be Cowboy Bebop. I felt that maybe I should have done this, although the value of the original anime is somehow far higher now.
The disappointment felt by the IP's creator only made public opinion on Netflix's adaptation sour even more. While reviews from general audiences still seem to be mixed, the vocal backlash to the show on Twitter was clear, and Netflix opted to cancel it less than a month after releasing the first season. The character of She-Hulk has been a fan favorite of Marvel fans ever since writer and artist John Byrne reinvented her as a fourth wall breaking wisecracker in 1989. Despite her popularity amongst comic readers though, most general audiences had little to no familiarity with her beyond her connection with the much more well-known Hulk. That's why, when it was announced that she would be getting her own series on Disney Plus to premiere in August of 2022, some onlookers preemptively decided it would be a culture war battleground before a trailer had even been released. When people finally did get a first look at the show in May, there were many who believed that it looked terrible, validating their prior concerns. The most major criticism by far was about the CGI, and how it looked cheap and uncanny. This aspect became widely mocked online, with all subsequent trailers receiving immense amounts of dislikes. She-Hulk's director, Kat Coiro, soon spoke up in the show's defense in the days leading up to the premiere.
In terms of the CGI being critiqued, I think that has to do with our culture's belief in its ownership of women's bodies. I think a lot of the critique comes from feeling like they're able to tear apart the CGI woman.
It should not come as a shock that this statement was not received well by anyone. Even people who didn't believe She-Hulk would be SJW propaganda were outraged. What must be understood is that during this time, Marvel was facing severe scrutiny for their treatment of CGI artists, allegedly giving them heavy workloads and tight deadlines while also paying them very little. So this comment from Coiro appeared to many to be a transparent attempt at moral grandstanding to deflect attention away from the real problem. When the first episode was finally released to the public, there were still some aspects that people took issue with. One moment which got shared around online quite a bit was a scene in which Hulk is trying to explain to his female counterpart how to control her anger, and keep from turning into the She-Hulk when she doesn't want to. In response, she tells him,
"Well, here's the thing, Bruce. I'm great at controlling my anger. I do it all the time. When I'm catcalled in the street, when incompetent men explain my own area of expertise to me, I do it pretty much every day, because if I don't, I will get called emotional or difficult, or I might just literally get murdered."
This irked many longtime Marvel fans who did not enjoy seeing this character, who they had seen struggle with this anger for several movies at that point, be talked down to by a newcomer. Of course, there were others who disregarded this criticism as simply the cries of upset incels, but it certainly did nothing to start the show off on the right foot with general audiences. But the scene which received the most widespread attention by far came in the show's third episode. After She-Hulk has a meeting with rapper Megan Thee Stallion, the two decide to begin dancing together, culminating in the title character twerking. The clip exploded in popularity on sites like Twitter, with people mocking the awkward animation and the sheer absurdity of it. As of now, it's unclear if Marvel plans to give She-Hulk a second season, but it's all but inevitable that the character will be resurfacing eventually. Jeffrey Dahmer is among the most notorious serial killers in American history, being responsible for the horrific murders of 17 people between the years of 1978 and 1991. Due to the disturbing nature of this crime, many people have become fascinated with the story as time has gone on, and this only became more prominent with the rise of true crime content. So, when Netflix tried their hand at adapting the historical events into a television drama in 2022, it was bound to cause a stir. But nobody could have predicted just how big of a reaction it would receive. From the get-go, many people criticized Netflix for what they saw as glorifying the actions of a sadistic monster. While some of these people were mixed on whether or not the show portrayed Dahmer in a sympathetic light, it was unanimously agreed by the people who hated the show that it was in poor taste to turn the real-life story of a madman going on a murderous rampage into entertainment. And nowhere was that argument better exemplified than the show's most outspoken critics, the family members of the people Jeffrey Dahmer killed. On September 22nd, 2022, Eric Perry, cousin of victim Aurora Lindsay, quote-tweeted a clip from the show in order to express his displeasure with Netflix.
"I'm not telling anyone what to watch. I know true crime media is huge right now, but if you're actually curious about the victims, my family are pissed about this show. It's re-traumatizing over and over again. And for what? How many movies, shows, documentaries do we need?"
The clip in question showed a side-by-side comparison of Lindsay's sister Rita Isbell giving her emotional victim statement during Dahmer's trial, alongside the recreation of that moment from the series. Isbell herself also spoke out publicly against the streaming juggernaut in the form of an essay published to Insider. She claimed that Netflix had never reached out to her during the development of their show, leading her to believe that they were only interested in making money, not actually telling the victims' stories. Once the ball was rolling, other relatives of those murdered by Dahmer spoke up saying that they too had not been contacted by the program's creator prior to release. Shirley Hughes, mother of victim Tony Hughes, explicitly said that the writers completely mischaracterized her son's story, saying simply, "It didn't happen like that." The program's co-creator, Ryan Murphy, quickly spoke up in his defense. He claimed that the production team had reached out to victims' families, but not a single person responded. But by this point, public perception was very much against the streamer, and they were doing themselves no favors in terms of how they chose to market their controversial new show. When it was first released, Netflix placed Dahmer in their LGBTQ category due to the fact that both the killer and the majority of the victims were gay men. Many viewers did not appreciate this, and the show was quickly removed from that particular section. It wasn't just viewers and those who were affected by the real-life events who were angry at Netflix either. Before the show even premiered, a production coordinator by the name of Ken Alsup went to Twitter in order to speak up about the alleged poor working conditions on set. According to her, she was just one of the only 2 black women on the crew, and her co-workers constantly called her by the wrong name as a result.
It was one of the worst shows that I had ever worked on. I was always being called someone else's name, the only other black girl who looked nothing like me, and I learned the names for 300 background extras.
Alsup went on to claim that there were no mental health professionals on set, which she found unacceptable given the program's grisly subject matter. She even went so far as to state that simply watching the trailer gave her PTSD flashbacks. Netflix did fire back about this claim, stating that free psychological therapy was available to everyone working on Dahmer. Alsup later deleted her tweets. In spite of the immense backlash surrounding it and the calls for a boycott prior to release, the confusingly titled Dahmer Monster, the Jeffrey Dahmer story, proved to be an incredible success for Netflix. It became one of their most popular shows of all time after only a few weeks of being on the platform, and after 60 days became the streamer's 3rd ever show to reach 1 billion views in such a short amount of time. While Dahmer was originally meant to be a one-time event, this monumental success led Netflix to greenlight a 2nd and 3rd season. Monster would now become an anthology, with each installment focusing on a different real-life killer. It was later announced that Season 2 would focus on Lyle and Eric Menendez, and only time will tell if this story will elicit the same response as Jeffrey Dahmer's did. Mindy Kaling's big break in the world of entertainment came when she was hired as a writer and actor for The Office in 2004. As the mega-popular sitcom rocketed her to mainstream success, Kaling was demonstrating her abilities both in front of and behind the camera, and it seemed there was no artistic medium she could not excel at. Unfortunately for her though, she would be sent crashing back down to earth when she decided to jump headfirst into the world of adult animation. In 2021, Warner Bros. Announced that Mindy Kaling would be producing and starring in a Scooby-Doo cartoon focused on the character Velma Dinkley, intended for mature audiences. While many were skeptical about this project, for the most part people tried to keep an open mind. But when the show finally premiered on HBO Max in January 2023, the backlash was swift and severe. What needs to be understood is that the controversy surrounding Velma was not caused by one simple aspect that people could easily point to as the problem. Instead, the negative reception audiences had with the program was the result of death by 1,000 paper cuts. While most assumed that the show would be the target of the online anti-woke contingent prior to the release due to the race swapping of long-standing Scooby-Doo characters like Velma, Shaggy, and Daphne, many did not expect it to anger just as many people on the left as on the right. As an early example of what people disliked about Warner Bros.' latest production, the first scene in the first episode featured a group of nude teenagers in a locker room discussing the overuse of nudity on television in order to capture the audience's attention.
You
ever noticed how pilot episodes of TV shows always have more gratuitous sex and nudity than the rest of the series?
This irked viewers for a few reasons. Firstly, many were simply uncomfortable with the fact that all of the characters being sexualized were stated to be underage. And secondly, by this point in time, a large swath of people had become tired with the abundance of meta humor on TV, with some accusing it of being a crutch used by lazy writers who want to use tired tropes while simultaneously shielding themselves from criticism for using said tropes. And this was certainly not Velma's only example of meta comedy. In addition to this, many audiences were annoyed by Velma's frequent jokes at the expense of white people, with some even going so far as to accuse Kaling and her writers of being racist. With all the negativity surrounding Velma only growing as each new episode aired every week, those who despised it began speculating about what horrible thing the showrunners would do next. The pre-release trailers for the series included a couple shots of Shaggy, referred to by his real name Norville in the show, in a romantic relationship with a not yet named black woman. Some people took it upon themselves to spread rumors that her name would actually be Scooby, and she would be taking the place of the iconic dog in this version of the group. Of course, this ended up being false, but for a short period of time, it was treated as gospel by those looking for any reason to criticize Velma. By the time season 1 was done airing, Velma was one of the worst-rated television shows in the history of IMDb. The show's creator, Charlie Grandy, later spoke out about the intensely negative reception people had to his work.
The original Hanna-Barbera shows are still out there to watch. We are not erasing the originals. We just want to be a little ice plant on the outer regions of the Scoobyverse.
This did absolutely nothing to quell the outrage, and many people demanded the show be cancelled. But these people were appalled when it was announced Velma would be returning for a second season in 2024. While some were simply perplexed by how such an unpopular show could continue airing, others blamed the people who hated it for its success. As season 1 of Velma was airing, a large part of the conversation surrounding it was about hate watching. Essentially, many people believe that the more viewers watched Velma simply to see how bad it was, the more likely WB was to renew the show due to its large viewership numbers. Those who believe this theory blame the critics who continually tuned in despite the fact that they did not enjoy what they were watching. Those on the other side pushed back against this though, claiming that Velma had been picked up for 2 seasons from the very beginning, and it was entirely possible that there was a much less vocal majority of audiences who simply enjoyed the show. Regardless, time will tell if the writers will alter course due to the backlash they received. Given their penchant for meta humor though, it's all but guaranteed they'll at least mention it. Reality television often carries the stigma of being trashy, lowbrow entertainment. Rather than try to remove that image though, many series in the genre have chosen to embrace it, playing it up and trying to top whatever has come before. And in January of 2023, TLC would premiere a show that put all of its peers to shame with its shamelessness, Milf Manor. The premise of the program was simple. A group of 8 single, middle-aged mothers were sent to live in a villa together where they would pursue relationships with younger men. There was just one catch. The pool of eligible bachelors they had to choose from were their sons. Prior to arriving on set, none of the contestants were aware of Milf Manor's true nature. True, the mother and son pairings had traveled together, but the casting call they were responding to did not exactly tell them the complete story. Nevertheless, the show's contestants took it in stride and seemed to embrace the twisted humor. But many viewers had a much different reaction. A vocal section of the internet was horrified by Milf Manor, and one review described it as a new low for reality TV, perhaps even a rock bottom. Of course, the series was fully aware of the reaction people would have to it, and seemed to go out of its way to be as shocking as possible. For instance, one episode featured a challenge in which all of the men had to stand in a line shirtless. Each mother would then be blindfolded before groping at their bare chests in order to guess which one belonged to her son. On another occasion, the moms were given the task of teaching the boys about the birds and the bees in graphic detail. These were just a couple of the many stunts that turned Milf Manor into one of the most talked about television shows on the internet while it was airing. Even though review scores were abysmal, viewing metrics told a different story, as TLC's controversial new series was the #1 most watched unscripted program as it was airing. As of writing, it's unclear if there will be a season 2, since much of the entertainment value many found from these initial episodes came from the shock value of the premise. If TLC does decide to continue, perhaps they will find something even more outrageous in order to top themselves. Cleopatra is one of the most mythologized historical figures of all time, with her story being adapted into countless films, shows, novels, video games, and many more mediums over the centuries. Arguably the most famous cultural depiction of the ancient Egyptian queen came in 1963, when she was portrayed by actress Elizabeth Taylor. While many people laud this film as a classic, others have found it problematic that the most recognizable version of the pharaoh was portrayed by a white woman, and they wish to change that narrative. On April 12, 2023, Netflix released the trailer for their 4-part docudrama Queen Cleopatra. Almost immediately, the numbers of dislikes skyrocketed and they were forced to shut off comments. The reason? The role of Cleopatra was being played by Adele James, a black actress. While some of the angry backlash stemmed from the usual sources, a large amount of negative responses came from Egyptian viewers, who did not appreciate how their history was being portrayed. While there is not a unanimous consensus, most experts believe the real Cleopatra's lineage was Greek Macedonian. It is also widely debated if ancient Egyptians had dark skin the way other African people do. While Netflix was claiming to be progressive by finally casting a black woman in the role, critics from Egypt argued that this was just another example of Americans stealing their culture to prop up their own. Following this backlash, the show's director, Tina Garavi, decided to write an op-ed arguing against the Egyptian people who were mad at her depiction.
Perhaps it's not just that I've directed a series that portrays Cleopatra as black, but that I have asked Egyptians to see themselves as Africans, and they are furious at me for that. I am okay with this.
It is important to note that Tina herself is not Egyptian. Of course, another aspect that had people wary of the show early on was the fact that it was both narrated and executive produced by Jada Pinkett Smith. The actress's public image had taken a notable downturn following an incident during the 2022 Academy Awards show in which her husband Will Smith assaulted comedian Chris Rock on her behalf. This had happened less than a month before the trailer dropped, and thus the animosity felt toward the Smith family was still fresh on most people's minds. The final nail in the coffin came when the critic reviews began dropping, as they tore Netflix's new series to shreds. And with that, as quickly as people jumped on the program, so too did they forget about it. Euphoria has been one of HBO's most successful and talked about shows since its premiere back in 2019. The drama about teens and their struggles with sex, drugs, and social media captured the attention of young people across the nation. However, not everyone was a fan. The parents of Euphoria's viewers argue that the show's subject matter and method of communicating it were far too graphic for its audience. Episodes often featured graphic nudity and explicit language which critics thought crossed a boundary. But Euphoria's creator, Sam Levinson, fought back against these complaints. He argued that the shocking imagery used in this program were all part of the point, and he would not censor himself in order to appease offended parties. In fact, he seemed to revel in the outrage parents felt towards the program. But it seemed as though the content of Euphoria sometimes crossed the line even for the cast. Sydney Sweeney, one of the main stars of the show, spoke out about her discomfort over the amount of nudity her character displayed during the first season.
I've had experiences where I want to go home and scrub myself completely raw because I feel disgusting. I didn't feel comfortable with my castmate or the crew, and I just didn't feel comfortable my character would be doing it. I'm very proud of my work in Euphoria. I thought it was a great performance, but no one talks about it because I got naked.
It's important to note that she did not blame Sam Levinson for her feeling this way. In fact, as he was writing the second season, he and Sweeney reportedly had a discussion which ended with him cutting down the amount of sexual content significantly. That being said though, it seemed like not every actor had such a positive experience working with Sam. A couple of months after the second season finished airing, it was announced that actress Barbie Ferreira would be leaving the show. This was not a huge surprise, as her role had been reduced significantly between seasons 1 and 2, but it did prompt some speculation about potential tension on set. This seemed to be confirmed when an anonymous source spoke out about the heated nature of Sam and Barbie's dynamic.
Sam is a very specific type of director, and Barbie was just not able to handle it.
The source also claimed that Barbie's attitude wasn't much better, as she was allegedly a bit of a diva who often let her ego get the better of her. The young actress soon refuted these rumors though. According to her, there had been no bad blood between herself and the showrunner, and she had left simply because there was nowhere else for her character to go. Despite these controversies, Euphoria proved to be a massive hit for HBO, and thus the network was eager to work with Sam on whatever his next big project might be. In June of 2021, it was announced that he would be co-creating a new series called The Idol, which would follow the journey of an aspiring young performer falling under the spell of an abusive partner. But it soon became clear that, even with all the drama Euphoria experienced, The Idol's troubles would eclipse it tenfold. In April of 2022, director Amy Seimetz abruptly left the project, and HBO announced that they would be giving it a massive overhaul. This was strange considering that, reportedly, they were already 80% done. There was very little explanation given for this decision publicly. The closest thing to an answer came when an anonymous source from the set claimed that The Idol star and co-creator, The Weeknd, felt that the story was going in too much of a, quote, female perspective.
It was like The Weeknd wanted one show that was all about him. Sam was on board with that. What I signed up for was a dark satire of fame and the fame battle in the 21st century. It went from satire to the thing it was satirizing.
More and more horror stories began to pour out from disgruntled cast and crew members, all of which were published in a Rolling Stone article in March of 2023. Of the many things changed in his massive rewrites, Sam's primary concern was allegedly adding more sex and nudity to the show, even more than had been in Euphoria. Insiders were horrified by these changes, describing the new scenes as torture. On top of that, crew members claimed that the production had become significantly more chaotic since Amy's exit, as daily schedules were reportedly being altered on the fly and rewrites were occurring constantly. It is important to note that not everyone was opposed to Sam's new direction. Lilly Rose Depp, The Idol's other lead actor, stated that she had an incredibly positive experience with the showrunner, even describing him as the best director she had ever worked with. But this did not stop both critics and general onlookers from lambasting the program before it was even published. Those who saw its early premiere at the Cannes Film Festival largely reviewed it negatively, citing The Idol's heavy emphasis on sexual content with a shallow message. Sam, though, was unfazed.
When my wife read me the article, I looked at her and I just said, I think we're about to have the biggest show of the summer.
But unfortunately for the showrunner, his confidence seemed to be misplaced. While The Idol received a decent viewership, its review scores tanked with both critics and audiences. Currently, it's unclear if The Idol will receive a second season, but so long as Euphoria continues to be a success, Sam will continue to be in the spotlight. So there you have the TV shows that broke the internet, which concludes a little bit of a trilogy I've had going on. And if you want to watch either of the two previous parts, they're over both of my shoulders. And with that, I think I'll end the video here. So until next time, thanks for watching.